Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend and coach, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Hey, Jim, I'm doing well. Doing a little better after we could commiserate for a
Yeah.
few minutes before recording. Just both you
Upcoming
and I.
episode. Yeah. Performing an autopsy on your own soul. How I Died by John Opalewski and Jim Wiegand. Coming to a theater near you.
Yeah, but I'm doing well. I'm excited about our conversation today.
Yeah.
The title is called "The Pastor's Most Common Leadership Led," and we're going to jump in right away here because this is we got a lot to share in
Yeah.
this
Let's do it.
particular episode. So I'm just going to go ahead without any delay and get started.
Hit me.
Yeah. So the question that I want to ask and answer today is this: what's the most common behavior that limits a leader's leadership?
Right.
Most common behavior, is it his or her walk with God? Um, well, it could be,
Build a
but my
case. Yeah.
experience has been that's not been the
Mhm.
biggest leadership lit.
Yeah.
Is it his or her giftings? I don't think that's it.
Right.
Um, is it, and this third one's not a behavior, but it's a reality. Is it a lack of resources?
Mhm.
And again, I don't think that's the most common limiting factor in a
Right.
leader's life. I think they can limit a pastor's leadership, but they're not the most common item. In our work over the past, I don't know, we've been at this, organizationally, we've been at this almost 12 years. In my own
Mm.
personal experience, we've been at it over 20.
Right.
Um, here's what we believe. Here's what I believe that the top limiting behavior, and this might shock our listeners and watchers, is the inability or the unwillingness to have tough conversations with those you lead.
Yeah.
You know, if a
Yeah.
pastor is unable or unwilling to speak the truth with grace and love, I believe that it limits what God entrusts to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would God, if you have a church of 150 or 50 or whatever size your church is today, and you avoid or postpone difficult conversations with people, why would God entrust you with more people?
Right.
Because there's a ratio here, right? If you have a church
Yeah.
of 100, you probably have 10 difficult people in that church. If you have a church of 1,000, you probably have 100 difficult people in that church.
Yeah.
And so, why would God give you more of what you can't already handle?
Right.
I really want to hear from you just up front, and then we're going to put this into overdrive because we
Yeah.
got a lot to talk about.
I was thinking about was Matthew 16, where Jesus is talking about yeast and dough. It doesn't take a lot to create a real difference in an environment. So if you got 100 people and 10 of them are negative, you have a negative environment because even though there's 90% more flour than there is yeast, that yeast will have a profound effect on everything that it touches. It will ferment, it will puff
Right.
up, it will change the substance of it. So and again, what is the shepherd's role? But to help, the health and well-being of the flock. So it is on us. We can create environments, right, where people can be healthy and insist on health in the environment, but it's got to begin with us. And if there is an enforcer of that environment, it would have to be the pastor, have to be the
Sure.
shepherd. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody really enjoys these kinds of
No.
conversations.
No.
Um, and if you do enjoy them, I'm worried about
Yeah.
whether you're healthy or
Yeah.
not. Um, but with those thoughts in mind, I'd like to get uber practical today. I'd
Yeah.
like us to consider 6 ideas around how to execute, navigate these kinds of conversations. Now, it's
Great.
not today, again, it's not exhaustive in the treatment of it, but this is kind of like a starter kit
Yeah.
for a leader. Here's what I've observed, and I've observed this in my own life. I'll be transparent,
Yeah.
especially as a younger guy who is inexperienced, and I've observed it in the lives of other leaders. When it comes to tough conversations, some leaders tend to bully,
Hmm.
while others tend to wimp out.
Yeah.
And health. And as a young leader, I was on the wimp out side
Yeah.
um, a lot. Health lies somewhere in the middle. So,
Hmm.
like I said, if you get your jollies dealing with these difficult scenarios, you may have bully tendencies.
Yeah.
And if you delay, avoid, obsess, pray for Jesus to come back before you have this conversation, you may have wimp tendencies.
Yeah.
And so what I'd like to do today is to begin helping us figure out that sweet spot between those two extremes. And I
Good.
think here are these practical steps I think will help. Here's the first
Yeah.
one, Jim, and that is when you go into a conversation like this, be curious.
Okay.
Curiosity. Um, when it's time for a difficult talk with a teammate or a church member, you probably don't have all the facts.
Right.
And so here's an idea to get that conversation started. Let's pretend the guy's name is Joe. Joe, here's the issue as I see it, and
Yeah.
explain at a high level how you see it. Don't go into great detail, but here's the key phrase. Help me understand it from your perspective.
Yeah. That's a great way to start a non-threatening. A bully is usually a frightened person. So a frightened person being said, "I'd like to understand you." That's a good environment to set. And someone who's just hurt, that's a good environment as well. That's a brilliant statement for both bookends of what might be causing the problem inside that person.
Yeah, and I think trying to understand their perspective doesn't mean you're going to end up agreeing with it.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but author Douglas Stone writes this. He says, people almost never change without first feeling understood.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that difficult conversation that you need to have with somebody, start with humility and
Mm,
curiosity. Covey put it
yeah.
this way: seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. Be curious. Here's the second
Yeah.
practical idea, and that's to assume the best. And can I just
Hmm.
be totally honest here? That's hard for me to do sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you struggle with that, Jim, but
No,
sometimes,
because I'm so optimistic at all times, John. I've never struggled with humanity. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. One of the reasons we're having this conversation with this dirty skunk is because he's a dirty skunk, but it's again,
yeah, and this one, yeah. By the way, this process that we're laying out for you today, simple to understand, a little harder to do.
yeah.
And this second one is tough. Assuming the best about the other
Yeah.
person on the other end of a difficult conversation is not easy. And
Yeah.
and I think here's a good question to ask yourself if you're starting to go into this conversation is it possible that I'm not accurately interpreting what
Hmm.
they said or what
Right.
they did? Is there a chance that what they said or did wasn't intentional?
Yeah.
Um, or here's another good question. Is this behavior symptomatic of something deeper going on
Right. Right.
in their life? Are they just lashing out because they're in incredible pain?
Right.
Um, and so if you're dealing with a performance issue, let's use that as an example,
Hmm.
before entering the conversation with guns blazing, ask yourself, here's another thing to do. So it's not just, hey, is there something going on that I don't understand and
Yeah.
I'm not seeing? Here, this is part two of this assuming the best. Maybe somebody that I disappointed me with their performance, their behavior wasn't clear about what my expectations were.
Sure.
Um, did I explain what I wanted in that scenario? And
Right.
you think at my age, Jim, that I would always do that well. And I still find myself sometimes seeing
Yeah.
something happen on the team. And this doesn't happen a whole lot on our team. We have a very accomplished group of people, but that doesn't mean that sometimes I'm not disappointed by something that happens or doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I'm 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 thinking that so much of the time I can point out in my own mind I wasn't clear.
Hmm.
I
Right.
assumed that they knew what I wanted, how I wanted this to unfold. I assumed they knew that if they got into trouble and they were drowning with this particular project or whatever,
Yeah.
that they could just come to me and say, John, this is not going well.
Yeah.
And so I think part of assuming the best is looking at that person and wondering, hey, is something else going on here that I'm not aware of?
Right. Right.
Was it unintentional, or is it I didn't do a good job of setting them up for success. I'd like to hear your thoughts on
Yeah.
this second one,
Well, I
Jim.
just one, and this is what one of my children's pastors said to me 20 years ago. He said it's very important that everyone who serves anywhere in this church understands that they are more important than what they do for the church.
Mm,
And so making, are you okay? This isn't like you. You're usually very
there you
conscientious, or
go.
you got to get put in this position because you are a very capable person. It seems like maybe something has changed. Are you okay? So I'm instead of saying I disapprove of your performance, you're saying I care about you. And I think that's a great place to start, even if it is a performance issue. I actually care about you. This isn't like you. You're not like this, or you would have never gotten to where you are.
Yeah,
So what's going on? What's really going on? I'm your pastor. I'm your friend. I'm your leader. I'd like to help. Is
yeah,
again a great humble posture to come at a problem. That's that maybe that gentle answer that turns away wrath
there
type
you go.
scenario. Let's start with gentleness and understanding, and if we have to progress to slings and arrows and swords and spears, so be it. But that let's not assume we're in a fight with a giant. Let's assume we're
Right.
we're here to help whoever we're talking to, and from there find out what's going on, and then maybe do some
Yeah.
good in the world. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think if you have bully tendencies, you're gonna sling arrows and stones.
yeah,
You'll be tempted to do that
yeah,
right out of the gate, and
yeah.
then defenses go up, and the chance of a healthy conversation are diminished greatly. So
Sure.
yeah, assume the best. Do your best to assume the
Yeah,
best about the person on the other side of this conversation.
yeah,
Here's the third idea, and that's to own your part of the problem.
sure.
Own your part. You know what? And again, a reflective question. And maybe you need to talk to a coach about some of this too. What, if anything, have you as a leader done or failed to do that may have contributed to the problem?
Yeah,
I think this is true that in most relational conflicts, not all, but in most relational conflicts, the parties involved each contributed in some way
yeah,
to that conflict. Now, some have contributed more than others, perhaps, but most of the time, both parties have a share in the problem. So
mm,
let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So if I'm a pastor who's refused to have hard conversations in the past, I've contributed to this problem.
yeah,
Like if this is an ongoing problem and I have not spoke up, I'm part of the issue here.
yeah,
Or, if I've uh, triangulated. I've gone to someone else about the issue with you as a means of avoidance
right.
instead of talking directly to you. I've contributed to that problem.
Yeah,
If people are afraid of me
mm-hmm.
because I'm not approachable, I've contributed to the problem. So part of navigating a difficult conversation is is owning up to your contribution. What do you think
Yeah,
about this third one, Jim?
yeah. I think that the only thing that I would be careful of is sometimes somebody wants to make you pay for the sins of your predecessor, whether
Yes.
it's a title, a position, a gender, but someone like you hurt them and they're afraid and so that again, coming in gently. But the other side of that, the other end of the bookend would be sometimes there's been leader after leader after leader has come and gone, and there's that kind of stubborn. I don't mean to call a person an old goat. I already called them stinking skunk, so I don't mean to say make it sound like these are bad people. We're responsible for them, but let's just take the worst and biblical scenario we can. There's a wolf. I think that again we're going through all these steps that are appropriate,
Yeah.
so no one can come back and sling mud and say, well, he never even listened to me. She fired me on the spot.
Right.
I have a grievance. So we're doing all these things, but I guess keeping in the back of our mind that there is an instance where your authority will be necessary to deal directly with an
Yeah.
unrepentant, unchangeable problem that resides inside of a person. But I think what I'm hearing you say is, but let's do everything we can to redeem the person and not just deal with the problem at the expense of the person.
Right. And our friend Craig Owens wrote a book called When Sheep
Yeah,
Bite, and he
yeah,
distinguishes between sheep and wolf.
yeah.
And even if it's a wolf, um, I do think this process still is in order.
I do too.
Um,
Yeah,
and as we work our way through the rest of this, even if they're not a wolf, they're just a sheep that's been stumbling around or gotten
yeah,
lost their way. There is going to be a moment here where we bring accountability
good.
to bear. But I
Yeah.
love that part that we have to keep in mind that some people have been disappointed by many leaders, and they're
Yeah.
assuming
Yeah.
you're going to do the same, be the same way. Here's the
Yeah.
fourth idea, and that's to listen. And you know what? It almost sounds weird that I should have to say that, but pastors like to talk. I mean,
Why'd you look right at me when you said that? You looked right in my eyes when you said that. Yeah, we
well,
do. Sure, we do.
I was one, and I still am one. We pastor pastors now, but I think
Yeah.
listening to somebody for real helps you learn. It communicates care,
Yes.
and I
Right.
think it actually helps them listen better to you.
Hmm.
Um, I think just, somebody can say something and maybe, okay, that's not accurate, that's not true.
Right.
Um, but being able to say, I appreciate your perspective on that. I can understand how you possibly could think
Yeah.
that way. But here comes number five. Here's the fifth one. Right on
Right.
top of that is now you share your perspective
Yes.
clearly. And I think it's important for you as a pastor to express your feelings and your perspective about the situation because you deserve to be heard
Yeah.
in this scenario as well. And that hopefully helps the other party understand you. Um, I think it's important to let that person know why getting the situation resolved matters and what the stakes are if it
Right.
doesn't get resolved. And I think calmly
Yeah.
stating how their behavior is negatively impacting you or impacting the team or impacting the church.
Yeah.
And here's the formula for that. It's when you say X, I feel Y.
Yeah.
When you do X, I feel Y.
Right.
And here's the impact,
Right.
the negative impact of either the way you're talking, the way you're behaving, and I think you need to be crystal clear about that. Don't
Yeah.
downplay it. Don't soft sell it. You don't have to you don't have to exaggerate it for you to
Right.
be just say when you do this, when you say this, when you
Right.
act this way, here's the repercussions of that.
Right.
And I like to follow it up with saying something like this, we would love for you uh, to be properly related to us.
Yeah.
We would love for you to let us pastor you and help you grow and develop.
Yeah.
However, if you won't allow that to happen, then we have to take, a further step here. What do you think about that fifth piece, real quick, Jim?
It has to be a necessary step. And I think this is where it gets hard because hey, I'm listening to you, I'm understanding, I'm curious about, and I think a lot of people want to end the conversation there. Well, good talk. Now that I have more clarity on why you blow up at board meetings, Joe, and storm out and cuss out the other deacons, I can better understand you. That's not the end of the meeting. I've
That's right.
listened to you, but in listening to you, I've earned the right now to say something. Now
That's
that I
right.
understand you, I want to address you. And I've been polite to listen to you as you've spoken in your heart. I'm asking you for the same for the next few minutes because I think there's something that as the leader I need to say, as the pastor, as the owner of the business, whatever that is. I'm in a position. I think this, John. You can delegate authority. You know what I mean? You can say, hey, I'm in charge of this now. You're in charge of that, but you can't delegate ultimate responsibility.
That's
It may
right.
not be my job, but it is my problem if there's a problem. So you've been given a position of authority, responsibility, et cetera. That's great. But when you do what you do the way you do it, it hurts people. So
Right.
even though I've delegated this to you, I cannot delegate. I can't ask somebody else to correct you when it's my responsibility to do it. So
That's
I'm
right.
I'm doing my job, and I'm asking you to do yours. My job
Yeah.
is to make sure we stay healthy, we stay in unity of spirit, and we stay doctrinally accurate, and those
Right.
sorts of things. We don't. I remember one time, and I've said this before, probably a year ago, but somebody just blew up on me in my driveway, 10 o'clock at night, in front of my neighbors, and screaming, crying, crazy. This crazy couple, right? And as he storms off, I said, "If you leave now, you're not just leaving my driveway; you're leaving the church. We don't behave this way. This is not the way we behave." And just that, almost like family value, Like, I
Yeah.
understand you can storm off, but that behavior is going to cost you. Now stand here and calmly resolve the issue. I'm standing here calmly. I want to resolve the issue. If you storm out like you've done so many times, I've warned you, don't do this. This is not the way we behave here. So I think even a phrase like that, this is not the way we behave.
Right.
I think it creates a cultural value that we resolve our issues. We do not allow grudges to be held amongst ourselves. It's inappropriate. We won't do that here. And if you insist on doing that, then there's a consequence, and that is you won't be a part of this anymore.
That's right. And so that kind of really leads to the last idea here, and that's to um, finally articulate a way forward.
Yeah.
Based on the Bible, what's the
Yeah.
proper behavior in this particular instance?
Yeah.
And I think you explore some options. If you need to change as the leader, commit to that. If you've identified, hey, I did contribute to this in this way,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make those changes, and then ask them to commit to change as well. And at that point, the ball's in their court.
Yeah.
Are they going to stay and work through the problem or not? And there are those moments, Jim, where the disagreement is so deep, it would be better for all parties to agree to disagree and move on.
Yeah.
The Apostle Paul did this with Barnabas. They parted company. And I've asked people before that have been misbehaving. When we get to this part of the conversation, do you want to fix this?
Good question. Yeah. Yeah. I'm willing to take the effort required, the
Right.
emotional risk, the time, the energy, the emotional capital to resolve this because I care about you. But it takes two to
Right.
dance this tango. Yeah.
That's right.
That's a great line. Yeah.
And so if they say yes, okay, here's the way forward.
Yeah. Good.
This is how we're going to handle this
Yeah.
moving forward. If they say no, then we prepare to say goodbye to that particular individual. Pastor, I don't think you're ever going to get comfortable totally with these types of conversations. The goal is to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Here. And I think you can and you must learn how to make tough calls. I wish there was a course preparing just on this.
Yes.
How do you make tough decisions? How do you have difficult conversations? Because without developing the ability to do that, you're not going to grow as a leader. I think these kinds of
Yeah.
conversations are growth opportunities for you as a leader. They're
Sure.
growth opportunities for your people. Some of the reasons people stay the way they are year after year, decade after decade, is no pastor, no leader has ever sat down with them and said, hey,
Yeah.
we need to talk about what's going on in your world and work through
Yeah.
some sort of process like this. And
Yeah.
when you, as a pastor, postpone these types of conversations, you limit your leadership,
Yes.
and your church's health is at risk. Your health is at risk. And I
Yeah.
believe the person who's the perhaps a difficult person or the problem individual, their health suffers as well because
Yeah.
you're not courageous enough or
Yeah.
skilled enough or willing to sit down and say, hey, I love you enough
Yeah.
to speak the truth to you. And so, Jim, I want to
Yeah.
encourage our pastors, don't let this be the lid in your
Mhm.
leadership. Learn how to do this. You can and you must,
Yeah.
so that you set yourself up to reach your full potential as a leader,
Mhm.
as well as the organization you're leading.
Yeah.
So that's what I have
Yeah.
today, Jim.
Something I believe we wrote it in the book that we wrote together, Putting the Good and Goodbye, is we said that if there's a problem in your church, there's a person, there's an issue, something's going on, and the congregation thinks the pastor knows about it but does nothing about it, that's a
Yeah.
real problem. If they
Yes, it
think
is.
there's a problem, but they think you don't know about it, that's a problem. But if they think you do know about it and you don't have the fortitude to deal with it, that's more of a problem. That means that
Agreed.
The loudest person in the room is in charge of the room. The angriest person in the room is the person that's in charge of the room. The most manipulative, most connected, most influential, most related to the most members, powerful person in the room. It's unhealthy. So whether or not you are right in everybody's eyes or wrong in everybody's eyes, you're responsible in God's eyes as the leader. So taking that responsibility, know this, that when you take that responsibility, God is with you. You're not walking into any meetings alone. People who are right don't need to yell. They don't need to call people names. They don't need to, they can just walk in and say, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have no other choice. I'm your servant, but I cannot make you my master. And so we're going to deal with this. And if you refuse to deal with it, that's up to you. I love you. God loves you. This is not a heaven or hell issue. It's a here issue. It's a now issue. And if you won't deal with it here and now, then we can't walk forward in unity. Then that's your choice. I accept your decision to leave, or I accept your decision to courageously fight through this, So great stuff, John. And now that you explained it, I agree. I think we have a great relationship with God, but not deal with these problems, and that will lid our leadership. We can have a great anointing, but if we don't deal with these problems, that is the lid to our leadership. We have to resolve conflict to move forward. So thanks for your wisdom. And as always, man, I don't know what to do here. How do I deal with this? I need someone else to tell me I'm doing the right thing, or I'm okay, or I'm wrong. This is where coaching can be very helpful. So convergecoach.com, and 30 minutes to talk it through with one of our coaches could be really helpful to you. And we would hope that we could be helpful to you, because we believe in what you're doing, believe that God has a calling on your life, and it's an honor to be any part of that we can be. So look us up, and we would love to be of help. In the meantime, John, thanks for your wisdom. God bless you. God bless you, our listeners and watchers, as you continue to lead from alignment.